In Privacy Watch, American intelligence officials are warning Russian cyber attacks could threaten the 2018 and 2020 U.S. elections. A piece published Monday in the Washington Post says Russia's disinformation attacks have continued since the 2016 race.
It was written by former Congressman Mike Rogers and CBS News senior national security contributor Michael Morell, who is also a former deputy and acting director of the CIA. And he joins us now from Washington. Michael, this is something that we haven't heard that much about. There's been so much focus on the election meddling, not so much of what's happened in the last year. So catch us up. What are the examples in the last year that concern you?
So Russian information operations, primarily using social media as a platform to disseminate them, have continued. And they fall into several categories. One category is political. And in that category, they are trying to undermine people in the political center. So attacks on John McCain, attacks on Jeff Flake. They're trying to attack institutions of our democracy. So they're attacking the FBI. They're attacking the media as incompetent.
And this is using Facebook and Twitter?
Exactly, exactly, as well as other social media platforms, right? With some accounts that are associated directly with the Kremlin, and then some accounts that are clearly Russian, but are covert, right? They don't want us to know what they're doing, and they're doing this every day. They're playing in the divisions in our society. They're playing in race. They're playing on the immigration issue. They're trying to raise concerns about whether illegal immigrants are dangerous, for example. So they're playing in all aspects, and their goal is to sow division, and their goal is to undermine Americans' confidence in their own democracy.
Michael, is this just old school propaganda in the digital age here?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The Russians have been doing this kind of thing for a long, long time, but what's changed is the scale. So in the old days, they would plant an article in a Polish newspaper and hope that that made its way to the United States. Today, it is direct, right, through social media, and it is massive because of the nature of the platform. So the techniques are the same, but the delivery mechanisms are much, much more effective.
So you call for deterrence, and I wonder what that deterrence looks like. The Washington Post reported that the Obama administration, among a menu of options, considered embarrassing information about Vladimir Putin. Is that the type of thing you think is a good idea, or what should we be doing?
Yeah, so I don't think that particular tool is a good idea for two reasons. One is we're trying to make the case internationally that countries shouldn't do this kind of thing. So for us to do it, it would set a clear precedent that it's okay. The other reason not to do it is Putin controls his media completely, right? So us throwing a few pieces into his media would not have the impact there that it's having here. So there's really two things you have to do to deter. One is we have to do a much better job defending ourselves from these attacks. And that's doing things like passing the legislation that Senator Klobuchar has introduced that says that political advertising on social media should be treated exactly the same as political advertising on TV, on radio, and in print. That's the kind of thing we need to defend ourselves. The other thing you need to deter is to impose costs on Vladimir Putin. The sanctions we've put in place today have been slaps on the wrist from his perspective. To really make him pay for this, we need to put broad-based sanctions on the Russian economy, and that will get his attention. But these sanctions on individual institutions and individual people will not do it and have not done it to date.
Mike, you write that the issue of Russian meddling should alarm all Americans, regardless of their political affiliation. Why do you think we haven't seen even more urgency from policymakers to address this issue?
I think there's probably two reasons. One is this is a different kind of attack than we've ever suffered before, right? Most attacks, you see the consequences immediately. So a terrorist attack, right? You see the death and destruction immediately. The consequences here are more insidious. They're harder to see, and they're more long-term. And I think that's one reason why we've been slow to react. The other is that, as we all know, the president has been reluctant to accept that the Russians did this. And we really need his leadership, right, for us as a nation to get our arms around this problem and do something about it.
Closing with a two-parter. Is this just Russia? And on the second hand, disinformation, something the U.S. has done itself for many decades. Have we clearly stated that we won't do this sort of thing ourselves?
Yeah, so great question. So the first is that because we have not deterred Russia, other countries, we are now seeing other countries starting to do the same thing. So we're watching the Chinese do this in East Asia, particularly in Taiwan. Similar techniques to what the Russians are doing here. We're seeing the Turkish government do this in Western Europe, trying to influence policy issues there that affect them. So it is going to continue to spread, and other countries are going to start doing it against us as well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chinese do it against us at some point, unless we start deterring. In terms of what we do, we have not interfered directly in another country's politics for a long time. We certainly did historically, but for the last several presidents, they drew a red line at getting involved and trying to influence the outcome of other people's democracies. Because we live in a glass house, right? We don't want people to do it to us. So historically it was done. It's not done anymore.
Former deputy and acting CIA director and host of the Intelligence Matters podcast, Michael Morell, thank you so much.
You're welcome.